Hello, my name's Blossoms and welcome to another Genshin Impact video, and today we're going over Kazuha. He's just dropped in the game and I was lucky enough to win maybe like my 5th or 6th 50-50. It was kind of crazy and I'm really glad that happened. If you want to catch those kinds of streams, you can typically catch us streaming on Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then sometimes randomly whenever I feel like doing another stream. But regardless, today we're going to be going over different builds for Kazuha, his best weapons, different good pairings for him, and just kind of my thoughts overall. I've got a lot of content planned for Kazuha. In fact, I've already got him at, the last ascension here, and I do plan on crowning him. So if you want to see what that looks like, feel free to stick around and subscribe to the channel, as that'll be a future video. And I figured what day better to go over Kazuha than Canada Day, since he's basically Canadian Aether, or the Danmachi protagonist, depending who you see him as. Pick your poison. But without further ado, let's go ahead and go over Kazuha. First off, starting with his talents, we have his normal attack, Gyaru Blade Work, and there's nothing too crazy here. His normal and charged attacks do look really nice and they feel really good to pull off here. But you notice here, as you scroll down, he does have a special plunging attack called Midori Ranzan. He does have his typical normal plunging attack here, but he does have this special one, and that is involved with his skill, and we'll go over that in just a second here. So for his elemental skill, Chihayaburu, we have basically he unleashes his secret technique or whatever, and you can press or hold this, and how it's going to work is you press it, it's going to suck every enemy within a certain radius into where you're standing and propel Kazuha into the air. And while he's in the air, he has 10 seconds to plunge down and deal that special plunging attack we talked about earlier called Midori Ranzan. Now, I know I did say you have 10 seconds there because you can sit there and glide for a bit and keep that, which actually comes into play for a certain weapon we'll go ahead and talk about when we get into a weapon. But do note that that is important. And I did mention you can press and hold it, and the hold here, basically you can hold it for a greater AoE, and that AoE is going to be a little bit more powerful in sucking in some of the enemies and deal a little bit wider of an AoE on the plunge attack down. And as you may have noticed here, it deals animo damage, and it's going to, of course, swirl everything, and it is very, very effective at controlling the field. And when you look at the scaling here, it's not too bad. It does some pretty good damage here, and you notice the hold does deal a bit more damage, about 110% more damage, at least at level 8 here. So that's something important to note, that it does actually deal some pretty solid damage, and as you level it up, those things, of course, go up. Oh yeah, and one thing I failed to mention is that Chihayaburu here can actually be used to double jump. You can use it in midair, which is actually pretty nice. You can do some funny stuff with it, where I've seen people climbing mountains without using stamina because they just drop and then use the double jump and then grab on again. So that's pretty funny. But yeah, this is a really nice traversal tool as well. Moving on to his elemental burst here, we have Kazuha Slash, which I think is funny compared to the other names of everything else. But essentially, he does a huge animo AoE like blade, like a circle around him, and it's really big. It's like a really big area. I think it's larger than Ganyu's circle, and that animo AoE is going to then keep pulsating and intermittently deal damage. And this gets elemental absorption, so if you absorb an element, it's also going to be dealing that elemental damage as it periodically does that damage. It's a little bit easier to just, see it. I'm sure it's on screen here. And the actual scalings for this is pretty interesting as well. You notice the slashing damage is pretty good. So you can definitely deal some damage with that, but the damage over time is rock solid, and then the additional elemental damage, this is the damage that whatever element you absorb is going to be doing, is that 54%. And the duration is decent here at 8 seconds, and the cooldown is normal at 15. And since it has a 60 energy cost, it's not too bad either. I'll let that low duration slide since it covers such a big AoE, It's still really effective and really good at controlling the field, and once you have his Q up and you use his E skill like Chihayaburu, it's going to keep concentrating the enemies in your elemental burst and just allowing you to dish out all that damage. Now, for his 4th passive talent here, we have Solmon Swordsmanship, If Chihayabaru comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro, when cast, Chihayabaru will absorb the element, and if Plunging Attack Midara Ranzan is used before the effect expires, it will deal an additional 200% of attack of the absorbed element type as damage. So yeah, essentially, I'm sure you saw this while we were showing off the E skill. It's not only going to swirl everything, but if you actually get an element in there prior, you're going to deal that elemental damage. And one thing that is really important here is that elemental damage, that 200% attack damage that you do as you come down with Midara Ranzan does seem to crit. So that's going to be something that's important as you're building your character there. So just keep that in mind. And you note that the elemental absorption can only happen once per Chihayabaru. But yeah, so essentially this just allows your skill to have elemental absorption and is really nice for some of those setups. And then his fifth passive talent here is probably the most important, the Poetics of Fubutsu. Essentially, upon triggering a swirl reaction, Kazuha Kazuha will grant all party members 0.04% elemental damage bonus to the element absorbed by swirl for every point of elemental mastery he has for 8 seconds. So essentially, anything that you swirl with Kadehara Kazuha is going to get an elemental damage buff based off of your elemental mastery. So you could imagine how that can really get out of hand. And one of the most important parts of this is the fact that bonuses for different elements obtained through this method can coexist. So example, I'm running an Electro Charge team comp with Fischl and Xingqiu. If I at one point swirl both Electro and then I go ahead and swirl Hydro, I'm going to get a damage bonus for both of those elements at the same time for the entire team. So maybe I'm running Beidou as well. She's going to get that Electro bonus as well as Fischl and Xingqiu. So it's really good, really strong, a really good buffer for your team, especially since it's Anemo and he can take advantage of something like Viridescent Venerer and not only debuff and buff, but we'll get into that a little bit later. The final talent here is Cloud Strider that just decreases your stamina sprinting consumption by 20%. Nothing too crazy there. Pretty nice, especially considering the fact that, you know, he can double jump with the elemental skill. But yeah, Cloud Strider here is just like nice, especially since he's already going to be so good at open world traversal. Having that reduced stamina consumption is going to be really helpful as well. I think he's probably going to be definitely my favorite open world character for just, you know, exploration. As for Constellations for Kadehara Kazuha, you don't need any of them to make him good, but they are quite good, especially his C1 and C2. His C1 reducing cooldown on Chihayabaru, and his C2 giving elemental mastery to him and other characters within his Kazuha slash. He's really good, so those early Constellations are really worth it. C4 isn't bad or anything, and then C6 is absolutely ludicrous, as you might imagine, but you don't need any of them to make him a really good character. Alright, moving on to artifacts for Kadehara Kazuha. I think it's kind of a no-brainer to just go 4-piece Viridescent. It's definitely going to be the best on him. Not only getting the increase in swirl damage, which he already does plenty of, but also being able to shred some of that elemental resistance by 40% is really, really good. It just goes with his kit, whether you're going a main DPS or sub DPS or just full support or whatever. This is going to be probably the best in the slot for him, as it just works with his kits. However, there are alternatives. Maybe you just can't get your hands on a half-decent Viridescent Venerer set. Well, a 2-piece Viridescent Venerer and a 2-piece Wanderer's Troop isn't going to be bad. Increasing your elemental mastery by 80 definitely isn't going to be bad, especially since he loves elemental mastery. If you're going for a main DPS Kadehara Kazuha, you might be able to get away with something like a 2-piece Anemo and like a 2-piece attack or Gladiator's Finale here. I have seen some funny builds where you use like a 2-piece Anemo and like a 2-piece Crimson Witch, and then they just do like a pure Pyro team, and he swirls that Pyro since he does end up dealing Pyro damage with the elemental absorption stuff. So that's kind of interesting, but those are definitely a little bit niche. You could definitely get away with other things like 2-piece Viridescent Venerer and maybe 2-piece Noblesse as well. Definitely a bunch of funky things you can do with them. I've even seen people running the 4-piece Lava Walker on like a pure Pyro team, but overall, just hands down, Viridescent Venerer is going to be the move. Now, as for the main stats on Kadehara Kazuha, you've definitely got quite the choices here. I believe Sans Elemental Mastery is without a doubt the move. Maybe if you're going for main DPS Kazuha, attack percent is going to be the move there. but Elemental Mastery is really big on him, and if you can't get the main stat Elemental Mastery, then you've got to be going for it on your substats at the very least. So I have a pretty good Elemental Mastery piece here, and that's why I'm really happy with this one. But for the Goblet and the Helmet, you could even go Elemental Mastery on those, and that's going to deal really good damage, and I believe some people have done the math, and it does like absolutely like really good damage, like the same as if you had a really good Animo damage Goblet and a really good crit rate / crit damage Goblet. So going full Elemental Mastery, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, some people argue that you don't want Animo damage bonus on him just because he ends up dealing the damage of other elements so much that just having Elemental Mastery here is better. And of course, as you get more Elemental Mastery on him, you're going to be increasing the damage bonus of those different elements even more. However, I'm kind of going for more of a balanced build between him being able to deal damage and also support the team. So I'm going with Elemental Mastery here, Animo damage bonus Goblet, and then a crit rate or crit damage helm here. Now, I do believe if you can't really get yourself some pretty good crit rate or crit damage, I do believe Elemental Mastery is actually going to be the pick here. Or maybe you already have a really good ratio of crit rate and crit damage, and without a crit rate or crit damage helmet, then maybe just going for you know, a Elemental Mastery headpiece here is actually going to be the move for you. I'm still debating on that, and I definitely want to test that in the future. But for now, this is kind of what I'm running. And of course, substats on this, you're definitely going to want crit rate and crit damage, and Elemental Mastery are definitely going to be your top priorities. But then you're really going to want Elemental Mastery or Energy Recharge. I mean, we already said Elemental Mastery. Energy Recharge is going to be really important as well. You notice I'm lacking a bit here on my Energy Recharge, and definitely something I need to get up. But then you're also definitely going to want things like attack percent, because you are sacrificing that attack percent Sans. So you definitely got to balance all of those. He's definitely a hungry stat character and definitely wants a lot of those. Now, as for weapons for Kazuha, you have a lot of options. I mean, like a lot of swords are just good on him. I'm going to be using Primordial Jade Cutter just because it looks so aesthetic on him. And, you know, it definitely has nothing to do with the fact that it gives me 40% crit rate and that it increases his attack based off his HP or anything. Why would I care about that? I'm just kidding. But this is a really good option for him, especially damage-wise. Really strong. The Skyward Blade also isn't a bad pick, but believe it or not, some of the 4-stars are better than Skyward Blade here, unless you're just really lacking on energy recharge. Something like Iron Sting or the Alley Flash even is going to be better. Now, I'm definitely going to be testing both of these, by the way. The Iron Sting and Alley Flash, we're going to mess around with those in a separate video. But Iron Sting's probably the best support option for him in the 4-star category, period. It's got an Elemental Mastery substat, and it increases your damage, and it's very easy to refine if you're lucky enough to get, you know, the sword prototypes. But yeah, a lot of these 4-star options are really strong on him. Alley Flash, not bad at all either. The only problem with it is that it has really low Elemental Mastery, and you do want that Elemental Mastery, but it does have a high base attack, so maybe if you're going for more of a DPS Kazuha, that might be the move for you. But maybe Iron Sting's kind of the support option. But these 4-stars, I would say, are pretty much better than Skyward Blade, especially if you have Iron Sting and R5. I would recommend over Skyward Blade. But I do believe R1 Primordial Jade Cutter does beat out Iron Sting a little bit. I think they're pretty close though, so if you got an R5 Iron Sting, just go ahead and go with that. Festering Desire also isn't a bad option, especially since you're going to be using that skill so often, and you get that energy recharge, which means you're going to be able to get that burst as much as possible. And then Black Sword also isn't a terrible option just for that crit rate substat. And you know, it goes aesthetically as well, which is important to me. But yeah, if you are lacking on energy recharge, something like Sacrificial Sword also does work with his skill, so you can even triple jump with this skill, which is actually pretty funny to mess around with. But I'd still recommend Iron Sting and Alley Flash over something like Sacrificial Sword or Festering Desire, or maybe even Black Sword, depending on how you're building him. I'd say Black Sword's probably the best 4-star option for that DPS, but and then Iron Sting best for support. You could even use something like Lion's Roar if you're using a Pyro and Electro team. And then maybe the best energy recharge option for Kazuha here is probably going to be the Favonius Sword. But as I said, all of these are going to work. If you have any of these are all going to be rock solid options for him. You just might have to adjust a couple of your stats a little bit on him differently. But yeah, all of these are really strong. If you want to see a weapon tier list, I believe Sekapoko just the other day put out a weapon tier list for Kazuha, and he went over each individual weapon pretty well, so I do recommend checking that out, as that is very helpful. One more thing about Iron Sting I mentioned earlier is the fact that when you're in the air, if you initially cast his E, if you just wait a little bit, that 1 second in the air, and then you plunge, then you can get both stacks of Iron Sting there at once, which is really darn powerful, and just like kind of one of the small techs you can do there. So we've gone over Kadehara Kazuha, and of course I'm going to be showcasing him a bit just so you guys can see just how powerful he can actually be. And yeah, I do have him at level 89 out of 90. Now, one big note here is the fact that his level does kind of matter for him as a support more than you might think, because he is so focused on swirl reactions, and swirl does scale off of your character's level, which is very important. I believe from level 80 to level 90, it's actually like a 30% increase in damage or something like that for your swirl. So his level does actually matter a bit, to make sure you're dealing as much damage as possible. And then also, of course, you get some extra elemental mastery from his hidden ascension bonus. So leveling him up is actually going to be worth it, even if you are using him as a support, because typically we only bring our supports to maybe like level 70, 80 if we really like him. But he's actually really worth it to bring all the way to 90. And I'm bringing him 90 just because he's probably my new favorite character. But here's the stats on mine. Yeah, I got like 1500 attack or so. I've got a really strong crit rate because of the sword, and then pretty decent crit damage. Need to get that up. 121 energy recharge. I want to get that to 140 ideally. And then, of course, 61.6% animo damage bonus. Pretty solid here. The 360 elemental mastery is really nice. I want to shoot for maybe around 400 without sacrificing some other stats, but we'll really have to optimize some of our artifacts to make that happen. But otherwise, this is a pretty good build so far. Before we actually get into the showcase portion, I did want to go over really good pairings with them. Somebody like Fischl is going to be a really good option just because of her one passive to where she deals additional damage whenever an elemental reaction happens with Oz on the field. And yes, that does count swirl, so that's going to trigger all the time. Bennett is also really, really strong just because of the fact that you can, put down his fantastic voyage, his elemental burst there, and then you can bring everybody to the circle. That's always kind of been the problem with Bennett, is the fact that you kind of need to stay in the circle, but Kazuha brings everybody in the circle, so you don't really have to worry about it as much. But Bennett's a really good pairing with him, and you also get to swirl the pyro off of the elemental burst. They pair really, really well, I'm telling you. And then, of course, honestly, Kadehara Kazuha pairs well with pretty much everybody. Somebody like Tartaglia, who wants all of his enemies to be bundled up, really good pairing. Somebody who wants to keep all of the enemies in the circle, really good pairing. Somebody wants to keep everybody in their circle, a really good pairing. Basically, just because of the fact that Kadehara Kazuha brings everybody in a circle into one little area is a really good pairing, and all you need to do is worry about swirling the proper elements for your team composition. I'd say the only characters he doesn't really pair super well with are maybe some of the Geo characters like Ningguang, and maybe somebody like Zhang Li. But for the most part, he pairs really well with a lot of characters, so I don't think you're really going to go too wrong for the most part on most of the characters in the game right now, because he's just an excellent sub DPS or support. Some other important things regarding Kazuha here is the fact that if you swirl 2 or more enemies, you're actually going to get 2 swirl procs instead of 1. So that's going to be important as well. That's why I said swirl is just so important on him. And I failed to mention that earlier, so I just wanted to go ahead and tell you guys that before we hopped into the showcase here. One of my favorite things to do with Kazuha here is go into the Noblesse domain and gather all the boys around and just get rid of their shields pretty darn instantly. You notice we're not having too much of a problem. Sometimes one of them likes to stick around a little bit longer than he should, but other than that, definitely not that hard. He definitely trivializes a lot of the domains, and that's definitely one of my favorite parts about him. Also, you just got to see one of the secret techs there, the freeze jump. If you get frozen in air, you get launched really high. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to show how he can make that domain a little bit easier. Obviously, we weren't even really using any of our other units. If I put in Fischl or Bennett there, we would have absolutely just slapped a lot harder. One of my other favorite places to take him is the actual Viridescent domain itself. It's hilarious because there's a bunch of ads here and just kind of get them all in one place. He's also absolutely ridiculous in the floor 11 of the Spiral Abyss right now, where its roll damage is increased by like 300%. That's where he gets really out of hand. Of course, we are using some of our other units here just to get everybody in place. But yeah, you can see he kind of controls this whole domain with his AoE. And has no problem doing so. She just survived a little bit longer than the others, and that was about it. And of course, would this even be a Genshin Impact video if we didn't bully one of the Cryo Regisvines here? We're just going to use Bennett and Kazuha and show you how strong they can be on the Regisvine here. Kind of ridiculous, actually. Go ahead and just get that going. Oh, I meant to do the E first, but that's all right. We can wait a little bit. That's fine. It shouldn't be too much of a problem. I didn't even mean to hold the E. I meant to tap it there, but, you know, as I said, not an issue. We're going to one-phase it quite easily. All right, the one final setting here is open world Kazuha. In the open world is just absolutely ridiculous. In a, you know, when there's a group, kind of notice everybody's already dead, and if they weren't dead, then now they are, and I accidentally started cooking. That guy over there just woke up, see all of his friends dying. Don't worry, he joined them. So, yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good representation of how strong Kazuha can be. So yeah, that's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys really enjoyed and see the power of Kazuha, and I really hope to help build your Kazuha and maybe some of the teammates around him. Of course, I am going to be doing more videos on Kazuha, like I mentioned, so subscribe and stick around for those. But let me know your thoughts on Kazuha in the comment section below. But other than that, that's going to be it for the video, and I really hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. My name is Blossoms, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.